go live.
All right.
Hi, it's Julie with Paradigm Interiors, and I am so excited to have Alicia Kay with me today. She is the owner and chief organizer at Try Organizing, and she will help you get your space organized and have it functional for you. And I am going to ask her a couple questions today just to get some ideas. Her primary niche is with people who are preparing for retirement or already retired, to help you go through your things and declutter and organize your spaces so that you can have a great organized and productive home. So my first question for Alicia is, sophisticated adults who have lived full and rich lives have collections and items that have a lot of sentimental value, and you may have this at home yourself, where you've got a lot of things that mean a lot to you. You may have multiple generations that your parents have left to you, and now the stuff that have sentimental value to you. So what are some things, Alicia, that they should think about before they begin the decluttering process?
Yeah, decluttering is such an emotional process, and it's my favorite type of work to do because it's really rewarding to walk into a home that has tripping hazards or collections that aren't being treasured and valued in the way that they deserve, and see all of that come to life. And, baby boomers in particular are so overburdened with possessions. They have inherited their parents' possessions, and the adult children want nothing to do with the possessions. So they are just so overburdened. And so most clients that I walk into their homes, and they're in this age group, they've got that heavy, dark furniture that, is a lot of times hand engraved, and a lot of collections and heirlooms. And it's just a different time today, where those aren't always valued. And so it's hard to tell those clients what they can and shouldn't let go of. And so it's very much a process. So, it's important for each person to know what their attachments are. And I try, in the process of just getting to know them, help identify what those attachments are, because we all kind of have our different personalities and different attachments to items. So one of the most common ones I see is anthropomorphism. And that happens when you assign human traits to an inanimate object. So I had a client that had an extensive doll collection and a Beanie Baby collection. And though she was well into her 70s, she really felt like those items were humans, and she didn't feel good about letting them go and felt like she was hurting their feelings. And so it's really important to acknowledge that. And I try to point it out in a really subtle way, so that we can kind of identify what's going on there. And it's not weird at all. It just happens. And, next, after that, is sentimentality. And this one I think we can all relate to. There are items we have in our home that maybe have no value. It could be a napkin from a wedding or a program from a funeral service, that have no value but hold a lot of sentimental value. And it's important to acknowledge those items as well, because they will have an important place in your life. Guilt and responsibility. That's a tough one. It usually carries out some heavy emotional burdens there. Sometimes they're items that are tied to people that have passed. And so those ones are really tricky. So it's important to, I always discuss with clients before we dive into those items, are there going to be some emotional attachments triggered here? And this is usually the first one that gets brought up. And then fear and poverty mindset. So if that client's experienced tough times, or maybe they've been raised by a Depression era parent who doesn't believe that anything can be thrown away, they kind of carry that but it still works. It still has value. Like, why would I get rid of it? So that can be definitely really challenging. And then kind of what goes hand in hand with that is frugality and thrift. That if it's perfectly good, why would I get rid of it? So those are kind of the 5 major attachments. And so I'm sure that you've experienced those with your clients, Julie, if you're coming in to do like a full-on renovation of a home, and sometimes there's not space for it all to be functional and safe for that client.
Right. Yeah. I've had consultations like that before and gone in and like, you might have a little more furniture than you actually need for the space to be functional.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you kind of touched on this a little bit. What about being concerned that your children may want something? Because I know that does happen a lot. It's happened with, my mom going through stuff and looking, do you want this? And a lot of times I don't really want things. Same thing with my husband's parents, saving things that they think their children are going to want, or even pieces of furniture, that you think somebody's going to want, and then down the road. So how give us some ideas on how they can handle those situations and, kind of helping their mindset on those.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts, right? So you make the difficult decision, okay, I maybe am ready to part ways with this, but then what do you do with it? And one of the common ways that I see someone becomes more at peace with letting go of something is if it can stay in the family. So a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, this child will take it, or this aunt or uncle will take it. And in some cases that's fine, especially if that person wants it. But we have to be careful when we are truly gifting something to someone, or are we just passing the burden on? So it's really important to know the difference between it. And the difference is whether or not the person that is receiving the item wants it in the first place. And sometimes it can be hard to say to an older parent or a relative or whatever that is, like, no, I don't want it, because that you could feel like you're hurting their feelings. And so I think it's important when you are ready to let go of something and you do think you might want to keep it in the family, offer it. Don't say, take this. Right. So say, hey, would you like to have, I'm ready to let go of this item, grandma's chest of drawers. Would anyone like to have it? No pressure. Otherwise, I'm going to donate it to a local homeless shelter. But I just wanted to give you all the opportunity that if you did want it, I can put it in a storage unit for you, or come pick it up. And then that gives them the opportunity to politely decline if they don't want. And in my experience, a lot of times the children don't want it. If it's a small item, they might. But it's that big, heavy wooden furniture that I find is like the hardest to let go of, but the easiest for someone to say, oh, I'm sure the kids will want it. And a lot of times it's a no. And if I did have a client that was doing this a ton. And so we actually just got the kids on FaceTime and went through everything. And so that was great, because it also allowed everyone to be super honest in the moment, because she was assuming that they would want everything, and that wasn't the case. So it was really effective. So I was glad we did that.
Awesome. Talking about going through everything, God, it is so much work. And I know from my own experience, it is a lot of work. And sometimes it's that anticipation of getting started, that knowing that there's going to be a lot of mental and emotional baggage that's going to come up while you're doing these things. So do you have any tips for how to kind of handle that on the front end and prepare yourselves to get ready for that process?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, if you can afford it, if it is in your budget, get help. So hire an organizer. This is my absolute favorite type of work to do, that has experience working, that has a counseling background, that can help provide some professional guidance on working through all of those emotional attachments. It could even be a housekeeper that's been with you for a long time, that you really trust and are comfortable with, the concept of having in that second person there is called a body doubler. And that just allows you to have accountability to another person. And it also helps keep you on task and not get distracted. And that person could really be anyone. It could be one of your children. It could be your spouse. It could be even a neighbor that you're really close with. Anyone that you feel just comfortable with and that you can kind of be honest with what's going on in your head, because it can be, some of it is really easy, but some is surprisingly difficult. And it's really important to kind of have that emotional support, but do not forget about the physical support. Some of this stuff is heavy. Boxes can be piled up high and it can be sometimes dangerous. So, ask your family for help. And if family doesn't live nearby, there are lots of different moving companies that will come and just help move things around for the day. I've worked on projects before where, we realize, okay, there's a whole bunch of furniture we're ready to let go of, but it's like hundreds of pounds each, and even myself and a homeowner are not going to be able to do that. So hiring some movers for the day will save your body from getting injured and, all the different massages and physical therapy you might end up needing from just lifting something you just should have hired a professional to do. So I think just don't be afraid to ask for help. Movers are well worth the expense, because they make it look really easy. And if you're wondering, okay, can they drop that off at a donation? If you make the phone call ahead of time and just make sure the donation center has space for the items you want to drop off and they want and need them, it's just as simple as making that phone call and letting them know those items will be on the way. So it's really not too bad. It just takes a little bit of planning, but that's all in a professional organizer's wheelhouse. And so that's why I just love doing that work, because there is sometimes a lot of steps involved. And so it's definitely, if you can swing it, it's a nice thing to have in the process of decluttering, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think knowing what places take which items is a huge thing. I myself have pulled up to Goodwill or somewhere before, and they're like, we don't take that, we don't take that, we don't take that. And and another thing too that I thought about, one of these days I'm going to write a book called Zen and the Art of Garage Sailing, because when you host a garage sale, you really have to be very zen about the stuff that you're putting out there, because you do have attachments to some of it. It's hard enough to decide what's going to be out there, what's not going to be out there. So I can only imagine that if you've gone through this process and you've made these selections, that garage sale might not be the best option because of those attachments, and you're going to may assign more of a dollar value to it than maybe people want to pay. And the end of the garage sale, you feel bad because you still got to get rid of stuff. So outside of garage sales, what are some other options? I know you mentioned charity organizations. Can you give us some resources for those?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of options out there. But I think the best thing to do is to research within your community what charities are out there that you feel good about donating to. So when I was first starting the process of becoming a professional organizer, and I was decluttering my own home, practice what you preach. So when I first started on this, I was like, all right, I'm going to do my whole house. And I did it top to bottom. But I first started calling around and emailing different charities in my community to find out what types of donations they accepted, what their charitable cause was, what they did with the items. So most commonly, items end up in a thrift store. So you drop off the items, they then get laid out in a thrift store, and then they're sold. Do not go back to the thrift store after you've dropped off your items, because you're going to see your items in the store. And I have had clients repurchase their own donations. So don't do that, because it's just going to trigger some difficult emotional stuff, and it's not worth it. And then find out the ones that accept larger pieces of furniture, or will even come and do a pickup. That's like the dream scenario. So like Habitat for Humanity is always good about that, especially if you give them a call. And they take a lot of like construction type items. So if you've got brand new cans of paint, if you've got boxes of tile, things like that sometimes get left behind by previous homeowners, or maybe you did a renovation 5 years ago and you just have extras, and you want to keep some, but maybe not boxes worth. So it's kind of amazing, especially when you're doing garages, what you find that people have held on to and things like that. And so it's just a matter of researching your community, what's available in the area. And then there's also online resources. There's places that you can, clothing, for example, companies like ThreadUp, where you can send in clothing that's within 5 years old, and it's on their list of brands, and then they'll sell it for you and pay you consignment. So there's all sorts of different options out there, and I really, as I'm managing, looking at their donations and what they have available, that's the other benefit of working with an organizer, is they're really an expert in your community on what can go where. And it, and that's really helpful. And I always try to ask that, like, hey, what's important to you? Are animals a passion for you? Great. Then let's get in touch with the local animal shelter and find out what type of donations they need. Do they have a thrift store? Can we donate these items? I was able to donate some artwork after my mom passed to a women's shelter that, sold for hundreds of dollars. So that was really great, So if you sometimes you just have to be creative and and ask the questions and get on the phone with the person that's running the donation center. And not everybody wants to do this. That's why it's really nice when you can hire an organizer that is willing to make these phone calls, and because it makes all the difference when your items are going to be loved and cherished by a new family. And, it doesn't mean that item wasn't good for you and that you didn't appreciate it. It's just not serving you anymore. Right. And that's like such an important part of letting things go. It's not that you don't love the item or don't appreciate it. It's just not serving you anymore. So it's really important to just know that when you're letting them go. So, so that's sort of my tips for just finding places in your community that it just is a way to give back, because those, and also get your receipt and it's a tax write-off. So there's always that too, and either it's a limited benefit for sure, but I always advise that versus holding on to items for an upcoming garage sale or an upcoming rummage sale at maybe your church or things like that, because a lot of times those are months and months away and things just pile up in your garage. And my experience has been the client calls me back in a couple months and says, get it out. Get it out of my garage. It can't stay there anymore. So, and in fact, I find that community events is actually usually a stall tactic to not actually get the item out of the house. And so I always say, get everything out before, when I'm doing a decluttering process with clients, it's usually ends up being the whole home, and it's weeks, if not months, of coming in once a week. And we always get rid of what that client decided to let go of that day before I come back. If they don't get rid of it, I don't come back, because
she's cracking the whip.
Otherwise, if things start to pile up, I'm talking trash, recycling, whatever that needs to go, we get rid of it. And I will hustle. It's not always in my client's hand. I do everything I can to help them with that, especially when they're elderly or they can't lift that heavy trash can to the curb. I do everything I can to aid in that process. And sometimes that's calling a junk collection. Sometimes that's calling the donation centers to do at-home pickups and things like that. We have to get creative sometimes. And but it's a really important part of the process. Physically removing those items from your house is the best part of it, because once it's gone, it feels amazing. I haven't had anyone regret the decluttering process, which is good.
I will say, and all the times that we've decluttered and put stuff out and, put something, and one time we got a box of stuff from the kitchen that got put out in the garage and it didn't go out because we were going to have a yard sale. And I had a salad spinner, that dries off your lettuce leaves. And I was like, I think it was like 9 months later, I was like, really wish I had that salad spinner back. I went out, I used it one time and put it back in the box, and I never needed it again. I mean, it's so true. If you're not using something very often, and it's really just a convenience for you, but it's taking up space and it's not serving you, and the clutter that it's creating is more of a problem than the problem that
Space
piece relieves for you. Then yeah, it's definitely better to get it out and have some peace of mind and functionality. I'm all about functionality of the space. So
yeah, and I'm so glad you just brought that up, because it's important, like when you are deciding to let go of an item, that you think about, how to, when you identify an attachment. So for you, it was like, this is convenient. I like having this. I like when I wash my lettuce, I like it dry, when it's all done. And no amount of paper toweling gets lettuce as dry as it does come out of the spinner. So I completely agree. But, it's just, I always go through like 5 things with my clients when we end up naturally hitting on it. And it just depends on kind of what attachment activators get hit. And so the first one is always respect for self. The object should be serving you.
Right.
So, if that object is like just taking up space in your house, or you literally haven't used it in years, it's time to let it go. I remember I had this like OXO avocado cutter and pitter, and the same thing with the mango slicer, and I never used it. I had it for like 8 years, and then I was like, I never use it. At the end of the day, I get out a knife. And yeah, so I finally let those items go. Respect for your space. So there's a saying that clutter is only clutter if you don't have space for it.
Right.
But, so obviously working within the confines of your space, whether that's kitchen cabinetry or storage options. And we're so limited in Florida because we don't have usable attics or basements. People that come down here from up north are just shocked at how little storage is. And I'm really finding in new builds, I don't know if you're finding this, Julie, but like the linen closet is gone.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't exist, or it's teeny tiny, or it's in the master. There's no like guest linen closet ever. And so it's just, storage options are really, really limited. So just respecting the amount of space that you have and is really important, and respecting the proper use or the original reason you purchased the item. You might have purchased something for a certain occasion. This happens to me a lot with dresses. Like maybe I bought a nice dress. I have a couple right now that I'm trying to like figure out how to emotionally let go of. Is I bought it for like a Christmas thing or a ball or a gala, when I was an athlete, and it's like, why do I still have it? Like it's literally collecting dust in my closet, but it served its purpose. Like even though I spent, maybe $100 or $200 on the dress, I feel bad because I didn't use it after that, but it served its purpose to me, and now it can go serve its purpose to someone else. So, I always reflect back on this. Why did I purchase this in the first place? And has it kind of fulfilled its destiny for me? And respecting your own decision-making ability. As you get better and better at decluttering, you'll get way faster at knowing when you're ready to let go of something. So at first you might be a little slow, and doing small donations is always a great way to start, so you can see, I didn't regret letting go of that salad spinner, all good. And then you can kind of feel better and trust yourself a lot more. And then finally is just the respect for your ability to provide for yourself. So people say to me all the time, I might use that. Well, someday you may want to use that salad spinner again. However, you trust your ability to be able to buy one in 5 years, 10 years, if you decide you want to get one again. Like it's okay right now. Maybe you'll have a 10-year spell where you don't want to use that salad spinner, but then someday you can buy it again. And that happens a lot. I see that with like sporting equipment or trades, like tools and things like that. It's like, it's a perfectly good hammer, but if you're not using it and it's literally just taking up space in your garage, like let's donate it. And if you need a hammer again in the future, you can go and spend $7 on one at Home Depot. Right. And so it's just kind of really knowing that even though it could have value someday, it hasn't for a number of years, and it probably won't for a number
Right,
of more
right.
years.
Like the salad
So
spinner.
yeah, so that turned out to be a great example.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
thank
Just
you.
like the salad spinner. Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your
Absolutely.
knowledge with my community, and I am definitely going to have the link to your website for your business
Awesome.
on the post, and probably host a couple of watch parties and send this out to my email list too, so they can get some of these fantastic tips and learn from you and use you if they need anything in the
Awesome.
future. And not next Friday, but the following Friday, I'm going to have Alicia back on here, and we're going to talk about kitchens specifically.
Yeah.
Like if you're planning a kitchen remodel, what are some design features that help with organization? And then if you're already remodeled and not planning to do anything, if you have some of the kitchen features that aren't so great, how you can handle those to stay more organized in your home. But I hope everybody has a wonderful Friday. Thanks again to Alicia Kay from Try Organizing for our talk about decluttering today, and have a great weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.